The youngest great white shark was caught on drone footage off the coast of Central California near Santa Barbara on July 9th, 2023. It's creating a huge push in the news. People are excited. We're going to talk about it on today's episode of Ocean Talk. Hey everybody, welcome back to another great episode of Ocean Talk. I'm your host, Andrew Liu, and this is where I talk about all things oceans so that you can be made more aware of what's happening in the ocean and you can live for a better ocean by taking action. Today we got a really cool discovery for you. It's a great white shark. Yes. Why is that important? Well, it's probably the youngest great white shark that we've ever seen caught on footage. Can you believe it? With all the stuff, all the research and all the stuff that we know about great white sharks, nursery habitats, the ecology, like where they go, where they're distributed, we have tags on great white sharks. We really only know some of the stuff about adults. And even then, we still need to know more. We don't know everything about great whites, but we never really knew much about when they were young. We never know their young of year, like within the first year of life. Never really seen a newborn. We don't know how they're born. We have an idea of, that they're pups and they're live born, which is great. We've seen dead pups in sharks before, so we know that they're live born, but we've never actually seen a birth of a great white. We've never actually seen small great whites swimming around near their mother or anything like that. We've never really seen that. We've seen pregnant sharks, but we've never actually seen a live birth, and we still haven't seen it. We still have not seen it, but there was footage that was released recently that shows potentially newborn great white shark. The shark was about 5 feet long. It was all white, which the adults are usually gray on the top, white on the bottom. This was all white, and there was a bit of a mucus that was coming off of it. The footage was filmed by a wildlife filmmaker named Carlos Gana, who was out with the University of California Riverside's PhD student named Philip Stearns. They were scanning the waters for sharks on July 9th, 2023, near Santa Barbara on the California Central Coast. That day, something excited hit the viewfinder of the drone footage, and it was this baby great white. So we know that this shark was fairly new. It was fairly young. We don't know the age, but a lot of assumptions seem to be made, and I'll post the article in the link in the description, but there seemed to be a little bit of controversy around it. The first thing is, there were a lot of pregnant great white sharks around. This is what the filmmaker saw. This is what Carlos saw. This is what Philip saw. They saw about 3 large great whites that seemed to be pregnant. They don't know if they were pregnant for sure, but they seem to have a bit of a belly on them. And those great whites were swimming around along the same area that they were in. At one point, one of the great whites decided to dive and then went out of sight. A few minutes later, this shark pops up. The theory is that maybe the pregnant shark dove down to give birth and that shark came up. The other question is, where were all these sharks? Where were all the young sharks? If this was a newborn, why did we only see that shark? Was there only one that is being born? We know that there are multiple live borns that are in the sharks at one time. Are they, born all at the same time? Is it just one at a time? Does one get caught up in the current, decide to go somewhere else? We don't know. But we did know that there was a liquid coming off that seemed to be probably the milk from inside the mother, as those pups get fed within the mother. They also sometimes feed on the fellow embryos that are around that haven't developed quick enough. We don't know exactly if it's a newborn. There's still some researchers are saying there's not really a lot of evidence to say that it's a newborn, and that milky substance could have been something else. We don't know. So there's a bit of controversy surrounding it because it's just one footage, right? But it's an exciting discovery. It shows that there are great white sharks that are being born in the area. Now there are a lot of questions that we have to ask, right? We have to ask, where's the area? Are there more sharks being born around that time? Is it this a specific time of year? What is this time of year? Why is it so important? Is it the temperature of the water? Is it the salinity of the water? What's the seabed like? Is there specific sediment that this area is specific to? There's so many questions that we need to know. Is this shark by itself? Did it stray off? Do the pups stay around the great whites when they're born? Do they just kind of go off on their own? Do they eat each other? Do they go after each other? Again, we just don't know. There's so many questions that need to be answered. How far do they go off? Where do they swim to? Do they just stay in that same area? Is there a specific feeding area? What animals are typical of this area? Again, so many questions. Another question is that some researchers think that great white sharks are born way more offshore than they are born in this area here. So did that shark just come in from offshore and it's just a few days old? Maybe it's a couple of days old. Maybe it's a month old. We don't know. We don't have a lot of information. This is an exciting discovery because this discovery can stimulate money for more funding so we can find out the answers to these questions. That's what I love about this story, is that there are possibilities to study this shark more. There are possibilities that we discovered a new part of the shark's early life and early stage, to find out its growth. How fast does it grow? Aging of sharks is a really important field of study, and to know more about that, how fast, what's the makeup of the food when they're young, how many are in an area, do they still stay in the same area, do they fight each other, do they fight each other off, do they fight each other for food, do they compete for food? There's so many interesting questions. And to be honest, a discovery like this is huge, because the last discovery that we found with great white sharks was from a movie called Jaws. You may have heard of it. As much as that movie caused a lot of harm for the great white sharks, where people were afraid of them, so they started hunting them and fishing them even more, it also stimulated a lot of funding from governments and from academic institutions, because people want to know more about these sharks. They want to know where they are. They want to know if we were safe from them. How often do they bite people? Do they actually bite people? And we found out that no, they don't actually bite people as often as we actually thought, or as often as the movie made it think. Do these animals seek out humans? No, we know the answer to that because of funding. We know that studying these sharks, we know where they go, we know their conservation, we knew how big their numbers were, how little their numbers were, why they needed conservation and why they needed protection, why they're on the endangered species list. And that stimulated more funding to find out their geographical patterns, their distribution. How are they affected by humans? How are they affected by climate change? How are they affected just by the local area? There's so many questions that we were able to answer just because of discoveries, or just because of, questions that came up from a movie like Jaws, from a series of movies like Jaws. Here we have our own movie. It's drone footage of a young great white shark. Whether it's newborn or not, is going to stimulate these kind of questions. It's going to stimulate funding to know more about these. And to be honest, this is quite a discovery for a PhD student from UC Riverside and a wildlife filmmaker that are just happen to see these sharks. And this is what happens when we study sharks. This is what happens when we study the ocean. This is what happens when funding provides the ability for people to be out in the ocean to look for sharks. We come across these discoveries. It's just a matter of time. We can find out more about these sharks. We can conserve these sharks. We can protect these sharks. We can know more about how the ocean works and what role these sharks play in the ocean. A lot of exciting stuff happening today. I'm really excited. I want to know how excited you are. What questions do you have with this discovery and footage of this shark that you want to know more about sharks? I would love to hear your questions in the comments below. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That's it for today's episode. But if you want more information, you can subscribe and click that notification bell to see more of these videos, or you can go over to my podcast, How to Protect the Ocean, find out more about the over 1,500 episodes that I've published on there, all about ocean conservation, all about ocean science. You get to meet a couple of the people that I've interviewed, a couple hundred people that I've interviewed on this podcast. And of course, I'm going to be releasing some of those interviews, the video interviews, on this channel. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining me on Ocean Talk today. I'm your host, Angelo, and have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.